I want to start the video by making one thing clear. Daily sub-Q or intramuscular dosing of TRT can work for a lot of people. All right. I want everyone to understand that before we get into what we're going to get into. Question you have to ask is, what of the people that it does not work for? How should they dose TRT? We have to remember that for TRT, our bodies will prefer certain injection frequencies and certain doses over other frequencies and doses, especially for libido. I.e., some people for that max level primal libido are going to require pretty bolus dosing of testosterone to achieve that, and they don't really achieve that on daily stable dosing of TRT. So let me break down what I see in coaching. I often see in coaching that people be doing like 100 to 150 milligrams of testosterone per week. They're daily dosing, right? And though in those cases erection quality will be okay, libido will be fine in the act. So if a partner of theirs enacts them to engage in sexual activity, the libido tends to turn on there, but otherwise it's never massively high. In the interest of having a raging sex drive, on daily injections for some folks, they just do not have that. But and these people, if we increase the testosterone dose per week to say like 180 milligrams a week, and instead of doing daily injections, we do 290 milligram injections, a bolus of testosterone every 3.5 days with minute amounts of HCG in order to prevent excess aromatization. Those people get their libidos back and erections stay good. I've seen cases of higher dosing, 120 to 150 milligrams every 3.5 or every 4th day, peak libido while not disturbing erections. Why is this the case? That's a point I want to make, and I'll explain that. Importantly, though, another interesting facet of doing TRT work as a coach that I see. Why, when estradiol is 25 or 30, usually the Goldilocks zone for estrogen on men for TRT for sexual function, but testosterone itself, total test, is 500, 600, 700, why are people lukewarm and missing that libido drive? These are the things I want to break down. Lastly, though, if you do bolus injections, why do you, when you're peaking, feel like you have insane libido and erections are working and you feel totally dialed in? But sometimes toward the latter end of that injection period, as you start troughing on testosterone, the protocol takes a hit. Libido down, sensation down, erection quality down. It does have to do with ratios, and it also has to do with how much estrogen reduction lags behind androgen reduction when you're troughing. Let's break all this down. Let's start with breaking down why daily injections, even if it's a sufficient amount of testosterone and when estrogen is in a pretty sweet spot range, are not causing raging libido for people, while erection quality might be fine for penetration. And we'll find the answer to this problem by looking at what happens when you bolus inject testosterone in the amounts of 90 to 150 milligrams of tescipionate at once. When you do that, you get a very substantial peak in dopamine synthesis. This happens via a temporary upregulation of an enzyme called tyrosine hydroxylase, which makes you convert more of your tyrosine into usable dopamine. Secondly, when you bolus inject testosterone, you therefore agonize the brain androgen receptors very potently for a long period of time with a lot of DHT conversion in supraphysiologic peaks. And if you started that bolus injection with estrogen in a relatively okay place, you're going to be dominantly androgenic with peaks in dopamine and peaks in androgen receptor binding in the brain while estrogen is still catching up. Therefore, you hit a perfect window. A window, by the way, which you can't actually achieve, some people can't achieve on daily dosing of 140, 150 milligrams a week of testosterone. All right, so that's point number one. It's just that bolus injections for men on testosterone give them androgen and dopamine peaks that result in insatiable raging libido. If you think about 140 milligram a week testosterone protocol where a person is doing daily injections of 20 milligrams a day, you will never reach those kind of peaks doing daily dosing. Therefore, that androgen receptor activation and the dopamine synthesis, which largely does drive libido, is not really going to be there. Listen, as some of you guys know, but if some of you didn't, I am a coach on TRT. All I do is help men fix libido, erection, sensation, and climax problems and permanently dial people in on testosterone replacement therapy. And every so often, but not very often at all, I open up an intake window for coaching where prices are slashed significantly and the longer term, very necessary coaching programs, especially to fix sexual dysfunction, become perfectly within your budget. I've just opened up the April intake TRT coaching window and will run until with each program 6 to 8 slots are filled. The links to book me are down in the description of this video. It is a 2-minute process to book, and once you are booked, I will personally reach out to you to set up the fact-finding call and start immediately. So you might get from that, okay, so I just bolus dose testosterone at 150 milligrams every 3.5 or 4 days, and that will fix my libido problem on TRT. Well, the answer is generally yes, but only for a certain degree of time, after which usually erection quality is going to suffer. Why does this happen? And let's break that down. So you take 100 milligrams or 150 milligrams in one shot, one fell swoop of a bolus dose of testosterone. Days 1 through 2, libido shoots up. Erections are strong. Your mood is aggressive. You're feeling anabolic. You're feeling strong. Everything feels on, and you finally go, hey, this is how I'm supposed to feel on TRT. But then day 3, day 4, day 5, something starts to shift. Libido drops off. Erections aren't as consistent. You're starting to border on erectile dysfunction. Sensitivity changes. And in those cases, I think people think, oh, I just need more testosterone. And you're partially right. What ended up happening there was the androgens peaked, gave you all the libido. E2 was still in a reasonable place and rising, but still erection friendly. And you were in a perfect ratio of very high androgens, surging dopamine, and relatively managed and controlled estradiol. Then, though, the androgen tone drops at the penile tissue, the androgen receptor binding in the brain reduces, and that dopamine surge starts to go down. And as androgens drop, guess what's left over in that state? Now you're in a lower androgen state with very elevated estradiol, because estrogen lags behind androgens in terms of reduction. So you might have peaked at, 1,400 total testosterone. Estradiol was only 35 at the time for days 1 and 2, maybe went up to 40, 45. Then you start to pretty rapidly decline. You're down to 900 total testosterone, and estradiol still peaked and hasn't really reduced yet, and now it's at 50. Look, if you're having trouble dialing in on TRT, get Mastering Libido and Erections on TRT, the Sexual Function Playbook. It's an instant downloadable guide that'll dial you in on any ester, and it's down in the description. The answer is, it's not just testosterone and your total dose of testosterone. It's the ratio over time in the effect duration window of your bolus injection that gets skewed. All right, so let's talk about the androgen tone dropping in that effect duration window. What exactly happens, and how do you fix it? Look, libido and erections are quite heavily driven by androgen signaling strength, and that's why you get the libido and erections are still good on your peak. But when it starts troughing, even if estrogen isn't super high, like it's definitely going to go up from a bolus injection, but even if it isn't 65, 70, 80, the estrogen becomes high relative to androgens, and that's where people have problems. So how do we fix this? Okay, well, I think we fix it by identifying what the real problem is. And the real problem is you're getting an androgen spike, but you're not maintaining androgen dominance as levels fall. The ratios shift, things go south. The real answer is finding a dose and a frequency of testosterone, in this case testosterone cypionate, that still gives you the stable high androgens but prevents the drop off where then estrogen is dominating the hormone profile and you get erectile dysfunction and sexual dysfunction. So some people will be on 150 every 4 days or every 5 days, and they get this peak, and then toward the latter end of that, when things are troughing, the estrogen dominates and they have sexual dysfunction. The better way to address this is to be dosing somewhere between 80 and 120 milligrams every 3 or every 3.5 days. So there, the estrogen is certainly going to creep up, but it's not going to cross a threshold. It's just going to cap at a certain amount. Aromatase enzymes don't just go forever and convert your testosterone. They actually have an exhaustion point. So if you find the right dose, again, call it 80 to 120 milligrams every 3 or every 3.5 days, you've got minimal HCG. Again, go back to the video that I did on how much HCG you actually need, because HCG is a large driver of aromatization. So if you reduce it to 62, 70, 90 IU a day, you still get most of your testicular function and you don't get that estradiol that comes with it. If you are a rather normal aromatizer on 80 to 120 milligrams every 3 or 3.5 days, you should not aromatize past your zone. Then you get the clean androgen signaling that stays elevated, and estrogen does not go far out of range into no man's land. The other way to solve this problem, and this is where you've got to get into crafty TRT protocol engineering, something that I've had to get good at over the years as a coach on TRT. You use the spike plus support model. And what that is a stable baseline daily dose of testosterone. Let's call that 15 milligrams a day. It lands you at around 105 milligrams a week. You're pretty stable there. It's not peaking estrogen crazy. And then once every 4 to 7 days, you do a bolus injection of testosterone. Call that 100 to 150 milligrams. You create the same outcome there as you did with my previous resolution strat. You keep estrogen at a very stable base where it's not peaking substantially with those low dose daily injections, and then you just peak the androgens with a bolus injection once every 5 or 7 days. If you do this right, the estrogen never goes far out of your range enough to start inhibiting erectile function via increasing anti-erectile chemicals like norepinephrine. And you keep enough stable androgen tone while giving yourself some of these super physiologic peaks in dopamine and androgen receptor binding in the brain to have max libido where erection quality is not disturbed. These two strategies are the closest to having your cake and eating it too. So what I want people to understand is that although it sounds very good to have stable levels of hormones, if you do that, especially in the mid-range doses, 120 to 150 of testosterone, first of all, your estrogen window is extremely narrow. You know, you run much more of a risk of that estrogen coming up relative to androgens and messing up your protocol. But secondly, you do not get the dopamine and the androgen receptor binding in the brain. You don't get those peaks. You just will never get them. So your missing libido will stay missing on those stable protocols unless you institute one of two of the strategies I've discussed in this video. Guys chasing max libido, strong erections, high sensitivity, primal sex drive, some degree of peak is necessary. All right, as I explained earlier, we are in a rare period with coaching. Twice a year or 3 times a year, I open up an intake window where prices are reduced significantly to book me for coaching, and this is one of those times. Whether it's a single session call with me, a 3-month one-on-one program to fix sexual dysfunction and dial you in, a 6-month one-on-one program to do the same. These are all significantly discounted until they fill up with 6 to 8 slots for each coaching program. All right, the April intake TRT coaching window has officially started. We've booked 11 coaching sessions so far. There are still slots open between the different coaching options, but once they close, prices revert back to their original price, or they're going to go offline for a month or two because I probably won't be able to take any more clients at that point. This is, as you see on the screen, a limited coaching intake window. It's for the single session call, the 3-month and 6-month programs. They're all significantly discounted. You can book me under livecortex.com, especially if you are having libido and erection issues and need to finally dial in on TRT. I'm the guy that does that. The moment you book me on the fact-finding call as soon as the next day, and then we begin. Other products, source list, compilation of trusted sources for anything you can think of down below. Our most popular product ever, Mastering Libido and Erections on TRT, the Sexual Function Playbook, teaching you to dial in on every ester with precision strategies down below. Mastering Testosterone Cream for Libido and Erections, a video course down below. Lastly, Mastering Testosterone Cypionate for Libido and Erections, another video course down below. All right, my brothers in test, I need you to do me 2 favors. Number 1, like the video. Truly does make a difference if you hit the like button. I'd really appreciate it. It would mean the world to me. Secondly, if anything I said resonated with you in any way, this is all we talk about on this channel. Come on board. I would love to have you sub, because each video that rolls out is going to strike a very familiar chord to you and your protocol, and you're going to want to watch it. Just jump on board, bro. Otherwise, I'm going to leave you with a video about bolus dosing that might just tie this all together for you to give you the complete picture. Please click on it. Go watch it. It's going to be worth your time. Otherwise, kick ass, rock on, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll talk to you in the next one.